The beauty of a woman, what can compare with her? You want to look at her and you want to admire her. Large almond-shaped eyes, dark pistachio color, thick black eyebrows, sensual full lips, strong cheekbones, graceful facial features, a neat nose, a swan neck. This is how Queen Nefertiti appears before us, considered the standard of beauty in ancient Egypt. Her name is translated as, "The beauty is coming." Nefertiti, the Queen of Egypt of the 18th dynasty in the middle of the 14th century BC. Nefertiti was the main wife of Akhenaten or Amenhotep IV. In 1912, during excavations in Akhetaton, today it is the city of El-Amarna, busts of Queen Nefertiti and Pharaoh Akhenaten were found in the workshop of the sculptor Thutmose. Unfortunately, only the bust of the queen made of painted limestone has survived intact. Scientists cannot accurately determine the origin of Nefertiti, so there are several versions of her origin. According to one hypothesis, Nefertiti may be Akhenaten's sister, that is, the daughter of Amenhotep III and the sister of Amenhotep III. It is known for sure that she was Egyptian and that her wet nurse was the wife of I, who was Akhenaten's tutor. It is this version that makes it possible to transfer the rights to the throne to Akhenaten. The second version says that the translation of the name Nefertiti, the beautiful one has come, leads some scientists to the idea that she is a princess of Mitanni named Tadukhepa, who arrived to marry Amenhotep III. And the third version is that Nefertiti could be the daughter of one of the influential nobles. The divine father I fits the role of her father. He was close to Amenhotep III and was part of Akhenaten's inner circle. I was the king's scribe and general of the chariot troops. However, not a single text indicates that Tuyu, I's wife, was Nefertiti's mother, but was her wet nurse. It is assumed that I's first wife, Nefertiti's mother, died in childbirth, and her second wife Tuyu nursed the future queen. It is assumed that Akhenaten, then Amenhotep IV, and Nefertiti married shortly before his accession to the throne. The bride was 15 years old, the groom was several years older. Nefertiti fully supported the religious reforms initiated by her husband and was no less a staunch supporter of the new religion than Akhenaten. Some authors even assign Nefertiti the role of the initiator of religious reformation, the driving force and high priest of the deity Aton, and even co-ruler of Akhenaten. Akhenaten always appeared in public accompanied by his wife. Nefertiti took part in all significant religious ceremonies, as evidenced by their numerous joint images. The reign of Nefertiti and Akhenaten is called the Amarna period. This period received its name from the modern city of Tel El-Amarna in central Egypt, where the ruins of Akhetaton, the new capital of the ancient capital of Egypt, are located. Akhenaten carried out a religious reform, which was based on the introduction of the cult of the only god, the solar disk of Aton. The main translator and son of the god was declared to be Pharaoh Amenhotep IV, who in the 5th year of his reign changed his name to Akhenaten, pleasing to Aton. The religious cult of Aton and the strengthening of the power of the pharaoh influenced the status of Queen Nefertiti. Now Nefertiti was not just a queen consort, but also received divine status. At the center of the new religious cult of the pharaoh was the divine triad, which included Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and Aton. Nefertiti became the only divine female person. Nefertiti's palace was surrounded by luxurious gardens with alleys and pools, so beloved by the Egyptians. The floors were decorated with colorful mosaics, and the ceilings, walls, and columns were painted. The walls usually depicted scenes from the life of the pharaoh and his family, or the ruler was depicted surrounded by concubines. Expensive furniture, household items made of gold, or decorated with precious stones filled the home of the Egyptian queen. Nefertiti was a fragile and petite woman with a beautiful figure. In order to remain the pharaoh's beloved wife, she devoted a lot of time to self-care. She took baths with sea salt, slaves rubbed her skin with aromatic oils, painted her nails with henna or liquid gold. As a powder, the queen used a powder of ground minerals, lined her eyes with antimony, and applied balm to her lips. Nefertiti's wardrobe included all sorts of expensive translucent calaziris dresses, a kind of narrow sarafan from the chest to the middle of the ankles with one or two straps. Representatives of the upper classes sewed such dresses from light, expensive fabrics, while the poor bought clothes made of coarse material. Considering that subjects were not supposed to see the hair of the monarch and his wife, the queen wore wigs decorated with multicolored strands, with pigtails and shiny hairpins. The ruler's collection included hundreds of such wigs. The pharaoh himself did not lag behind his wife. He wore a loincloth, a transparent tunic, necklaces, bracelets on his forearms, wrists, and ankles. The monarch's head was decorated with a wig with pendants and a golden diadem entwined with a cobra. During celebrations, the head of state put on a crown. An integral attribute was a false beard, which was braided into a pigtail. In order to pay for luxurious palaces, expensive clothes, and exquisite dishes that were served at the pharaoh's table, there had to be a lot of money in the treasury. Usually it was enriched by campaigns. Not only the ruler and his family prospered from them, but also representatives of the nobility and priests, whom the monarch generously gifted, thus wanting to gain the favor of the gods. During the festivities, religious figures received large sums of money. In ancient Egypt, it was very prestigious to be a priest. They lived like kings. They owned large plots of land, thousands of slaves, hundreds of villages, and sometimes even separate cities. In the last years of Akhenaten's reign, there were two co-rulers who had the same throne name but different personal names, Ankheperor Neferneferuaten and Ankheperor Semnekara. D. Harris in his article puts forward a theory that Neferneferuaten and Semnekara are one person, Queen Nefertiti. Funerary steles in the city of Akhetaton, which date back to the 5th year of the reign of Pharaoh Akhenaten, have preserved inscriptions about the extended name of Nefertiti. The name of Nefertiti, according to these inscriptions, is Nefer-Nefe-Ruaton Nefertiti. 4 Nefertiti remains in power after the death of Akhenaten in the 17th year of his reign. It is not exactly known whether she was a regent under Tutankhamun or a full-fledged ruler. In the 3rd year of the reign of Nefer-Neferu-Aton, the priests of Aton regained their influence. The last mention of her reign is considered to be the 3rd year after the death of Akhenaten. Then Tutankhamun ascends to the throne, and there are no more mentions of Nefertiti. The phrase Nefer-Neferu-Aton is often mentioned before the name of Nefertiti, which means absolutely perfect Aton. Everything that is called the term Nefer means achieving a state of harmony. Nefertiti also bears the epithet pleasing Aton with her sweet-sounding voice and her hands that hold the sistra, refers to the great priestess musician, who was quite traditional. This role was usually played by the head of the female colleague of the servants of the goddess Hathor, who was identified with Nefertiti. Nefertiti and Akhetaton performed most of the ritual duties. The queen not only took an active part in most ceremonies, but also headed some. The text of the Great Hymn to Aton emphasizes the power of the queen and associates it with the power of the pharaoh. This fact recognizes her divine status, identical to Akhenaten. Another fact of the existence of the status of a goddess in Nefertiti is considered to be the presence of statues of Nefertiti in the large temple of Aton. The names of Aton are carved on the stone figures. The presence of these statues may indicate the existence of a cult of these statues, and only a goddess could be depicted this way. Figures of goddesses were placed in the corners of the sarcophagus. In Amarna art, figurines of goddesses were replaced by statues of Nefertiti. The ruling spouses Akhenaten and Nefertiti could not have an heir. They only had daughters. There were 6 of them. The pharaoh doted on his beautiful wife, who bore him 6 daughters, but he seriously thought about continuing the family line. The ruler's second wife bore him his only heir, Tutankhamun, but Nefertiti raised him. The love of the royal couple became one of the main subjects for the artists of Akhetaton, the capital of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Never before in Egyptian art had there been works that so vividly demonstrated the feelings of the royal spouses. Nefertiti, a beauty, beautiful in a diadem with 2 feathers, the mistress of joy full of praise, filled with beauty with her husband are sitting with children. Nefertiti swings her legs, climbing on her husband's lap and holding her little daughter with her hand. One of the reliefs discovered in Akhetaton captures the culmination of this idol, the kiss of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Each scene necessarily includes Aton, a solar disk with numerous hands extending ankhs, symbols of eternal life to the royal couple. Nefertiti played an exceptionally important role in the religious life of Egypt at that time, accompanying her husband during sacrifices, sacred rites, and religious festivals. She was the living embodiment of the life-giving power of the sun, which gives life. In Gemphaton and Qutbenben, the great temples of the god Aton in Thebes, prayers were offered to her. None of the temple actions could take place without her, the guarantee of fertility and prosperity. The walls of the hall erected by Akhenaten in the 6th year of his reign in his capital to celebrate the said ceremony were decorated with colossal sculptures of Nefertiti, identified with the goddess Tefnut, the goddess of moisture, the daughter of the sun Ra, who stood for the maintenance of world harmony and divine law. In this hypostasis, Nefertiti could be depicted as a sphinx, striking the enemies of Egypt with a club. Possessing enormous power and authority, the queen was most often depicted in her favorite headdress, a high blue wig entwined with gold ribbons and a uraeus, which symbolically emphasized her connection with the formidable goddesses, the daughters of the sun. Conclusion. On December 6, 1912, the German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt and his assistant Hermann Ranke discovered a unique bust of Queen Nefertiti in the workshop of the sculptor Thutmose the Younger in Amarna, which has since become one of the symbols of the beauty and sophistication of ancient Egyptian culture. In his archaeological diary, opposite a sketch of the monument, Borchardt wrote only one sentence: "Describing is pointless, you have to look." The unique bust of the queen, discovered by the team of Egyptologist Borchardt and taken to Germany in 1913, is kept in the collection of the Egyptian Museum in Berlin, although since 1924 there have been demands and disputes about the need for its return. When later in 1933 the Egyptian Ministry of Culture requested it back, and Germany refused to return it, Egyptologists from Germany were prohibited from conducting archaeological excavations in Egypt. The Second World War and the persecution of Borchardt's wife because of her Jewish origin prevented the archaeologist from continuing his research in full. The bust of Nefertiti officially belongs to the Prussian Cultural Heritage Foundation. However, Egypt, represented by high-ranking officials of the Ministry of Culture, officially demands that the FRG return the bust of Nefertiti that was taken away. The bust of Nefertiti, 50 centimeters high and weighing about 20 kilograms, is made of solid limestone, finished with a gypsum and hydrite mixture, and completely painted. There are no hieroglyphic inscriptions on it. However, the characteristic crown, which Ludwig Borchardt called a wig, in fact dating back to the Kepresh or Atef, helped researchers identify the model by comparing the sculpture with other images of Nefertiti. The almost perfect preservation, the brightness of the colors, and the liveliness of the right eye make a striking impression on the viewer. At the same time, the left eye is missing. Some Egyptologists suggest that the inlay was never installed, although the portrait of Nefertiti is still the only example of ancient Egyptian sculpture with one eye. The mummy of Queen Nefertiti has still not been found and her burial remains a mystery.